My name is Ben Bussey. I'm a developer evangelist with DreamFactory. We're very excited to be talking about the Internet of Things for the cloud. We're going to be joined shortly by Nat Frampton from FramTack, who will be sharing a lot of what they've been doing with their product and how they've integrated DreamFactory into their solution for Internet of Things. So welcome, everyone. So to start, I'm going to provide a little bit of an overview about DreamFactories for a few minutes. For those, some people might be quite familiar with what we do and actually developing applications. Others might be new to it. But most of the time will be Nat on the line showing a demo of their product, and that should be really interesting for people. There's tons of innovation happening in Internet of Things. It's quite new, so I think this will be useful to see how things are really working in the real world with IoT. And then we'll wrap up. We'll leave at least 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So what is DreamFactory? In a nutshell, we are an open source REST API platform. So you install DreamFactory, as I mentioned, on any cloud or server environment. And what DreamFactory really does is it provides a REST API to various data sources. So it could be a SQL database that you're trying to connect to. It could be a NoSQL database. It could be file storage. And DreamFactory abstracts all of this, so you don't have to write your own REST APIs to all of these data sources, and you don't need to write your own security framework for those data sources, and you don't need to deal with user management and so forth. So it really does a lot of the heavy lifting on the server side for you. And then as a developer, REST APIs are great for a variety of development environments, right? You can be developing, native applications on your phone. You might be developing HTML5 hybrid type of application. REST APIs work great for both of those. Single-page application, desktop app that's running in a browser can also work quite well. And then what we're really going to focus on today, though, is this idea of devices. So device sensors that are transmitting information, and then and Nat's really going to go into a lot of detail about how that all works with Solution Family. So DreamFactory, as I said, you can install it really on any type of server environment. We support a number. We're signing up a bunch of different partners, Cloud Foundry, Platform as a Service, Google, VMware, so some of them here. We've partnered with a company called Bitnami. So Bitnami, if you go to bitnami.com, have a look. We have one-click installers that make it really easy to deploy DreamFactory in a variety of environments. You can, of course, get it from GitHub as well, install it that way. So the connections to databases is really key. Nat's going to talk about the data that they're connecting to and how they've done that. But what we're really trying to do for developers is make it really easy to be completely agnostic in terms of what database you want to use. And the ability, because we've abstracted the APIs, it's very easy to switch out data sources. So you might set up an app and have an existing MySQL database, and you want to connect to that. That can already be running, and you have data, but perhaps you want the choice to switch to another data vendor. That's really easy because the REST APIs are all unified and consistent across all of these different types of databases. And the same applies to file storage as well. So today we're going to talk about IoT, but it's worth just mentioning the SDKs for mobile development. So with Nat's project, they have a mobile application, which you'll see. So there's really two sides of it. There are the devices that are transmitting information, but then if you're building a mobile application and you need to consume data from the back end, present information to an end user, we have a variety of SDKs for HTML5 type of development or mobile, or you can go ahead and use frameworks like Angular to build sort of single-page apps that run in a browser, or maybe you blend that with Ionic or some other framework to build a mobile app. A couple other things just quickly on the way that the sort of architecture of DreamFactory, it really kind of sits in the middle. So you're hooking up to backend systems, as I mentioned, SQL, NoSQL, or file storage. And then it provides a whole security framework around that. So you have user management, roles and permissions, session management, which really governs which users can access which apps and which users can access which services. And then you have a variety of choices for hosting. So you might want to host your app binaries, in the DreamFactory services platform, but you don't have to do that. You can just use it as a RESTful endpoint as well. And then DreamFactory really exposes all of those data sources as REST APIs to the SDK, and it does that dynamically. So if you set up, So you have 100 APIs that you've set up in DreamFactory that need to be consumed. If you add another one, the SDKs automatically inherit or have access to those APIs on the fly, which is really, really useful for developing. So the paradigm, it's not a sort of an HTML page gen type of paradigm here obviously for IoT, but also for mobile. So if you're developing on DreamFactory, you're developing a client-side application that's running on a device or a phone or whatever, and then you're making REST API calls to your DSP or your DreamFactory services platform. And you can think of the DSP as really almost a JSON server. It's returning JSON. We also support XML, but JSON is typically the choice for mobile, and it's just returning JSON packets back to your client and providing all of the security framework around that. So now that's a quick intro. Nat's going to go into a lot more detail, but I just kind of wanted to talk about at a very high level the sort of the usage pattern for their solution. So in the middle here, you've got DreamFactory is really you can think of it as the runtime for the REST APIs that solution family has implemented. So you've got smart devices, for example. I think Nat's going to show an example of it's like a furnace, for example. It has a sensor and it's transmitting temperature data, and that temperature data is from a machine. A sensor is transmitted RESTfully to the platform and then stored in a database. And the service platform itself, the DSP, can be running. It really can be running on the cloud. So you could deploy this, say, on AWS. For example, or it can run on premises. So this is really useful for them because this is a solution, so they can a software solution, so they can deploy it to their customers. Say a building, a company that's managing a number of buildings would be a customer. That customer can deploy the solution where that customer wants to have it, right? So they can run it on premise if they want, or they can run it, on the public cloud or wherever they like. So it's completely kind of independent of the cloud. It's flexible that way. And then the consumption or the information that's viewed is also being accessed by that same database. So they've built a really cool dashboard application that shows alert information and things like updates, and it's a mobile app. So it's using the REST API that DreamFactory provides to access all of that data that the sensors are transmitting. And then lastly, there's an administrative component where an end user, say a building manager, can actually manage the device and the business rules around how that information is getting transmitted. That's another application that's using the service platform in the back end, also using the same REST APIs. So that, in a nutshell, I probably haven't done it complete justice, and that's going to get into a lot more of the details and kind of explain how they've provided the solution and really kind of the value points for their customers. So with that, let's transition to Nat.
Okay, are we coming to my screen? Can I share my screen, or what's the, or you guys drive?
Nat, you can go ahead and share. You should have the
show my screen. Okay, I think I already did it. Resume slideshow. There we go. Okay, and everyone's able to.
Should have a button there that says, yeah, there we go. We got it now. Great.
Okay. Hi, my name's Nat Frampton. I'm with FramTack, and I invented the technology called Solution Family, which was, I feel is our responsibility as technologists to make sure that things are as friendly to people as possible. And been a tool developer for the last 25 years, and for the past 15 years been creating the Solution Family of technology. And it creates a distributed application platform. So we can I'm going to give you a demonstration right now on a platform called Galileo from Intel. It's, I think they run about $60. You can purchase one of these things, 256 megs of RAM, running kind of the equivalent of an old 400 megahertz 486 is a good equivalent to think of. No heat. It's a wonderful platform. But we're going to give that the intelligence. We're going to do everything we're about to do on that little device. And we created this application platform to give you the extensibility and the flexibility to create real-world IoT applications. So that's fun. But if we don't have a business value, it doesn't matter. And we were able to reduce the development cost by 80 to 90%. And we were working with tools, and we had a wonderful story where we're getting data from devices and bringing it up and making decisions and giving intelligence and moving that. And what we do is we'd store it locally, and then we started branching out, and the IoT acronym started coming together, and we started looking for, well, what's a good partner to go out and do those cloud platforms, and DreamFactory, through their responsiveness, the innovative APIs, taking my worry away from figuring out what the back end is and only having to support a single interface, is very powerful and has been very helpful to us by reducing our development time by 80 to 90%, because we get something consistent and well supported. So that's why we've teamed with DreamFactory. Let's see, there we go. So what do we do? Everybody's got something they want to monitor. It's the in thing, right? So you've got an engine, you've got a PLC, you've got an air conditioner on the roof, you've got a boiler in the basement, you've got, we work on all kinds of mobile applications. So those basic appliances, and everybody reads the magazines, and they know they need a cloud. So obviously, we're here looking at DreamFactory's cloud, which has analytics and storage and those great mobile applications. So everybody has those things, and they come to you and say, can you help me? So what we do is we take a computer, whether it can be this Galileo computer we run on all of the Linux operating systems and the Microsoft operating systems, and we put an engine, our solution engine, on that computer as close to the devices we can that we're measuring, or the appliance. So we call that the edge. We're right on the edge of the appliance. We might be in the control cabinet or wherever it happens to be. And that solution engine has a data model. Well, I'm going to show you these tools quickly. We're going to take Solution Builder, and we're going to configure that solution engine. We're going to do 4 things. We're going to get some data from the device, and then we're going to analyze that data. We may just do a moving average or something like that we want to do with the data. But we may run complex algorithms that we brought onto that computer, whatever we need. And we're going to add more data to the system, and then we're going to take that data and move it to and from the cloud, right? So we need that data. We want to move it out to DreamFactory. How do we do that? Can we create some tools to make that simpler? And finally, why are we doing this? Well, we're trying to learn and create business value out of our system. So what we're busy doing is trying to figure out what are the control points and how can we change the behavior of the system so that it runs better, right? That's what we're looking for. So that's basically what we do in a nutshell. And now that we have the data into DreamFactory and a nice consistent interface, we built a tool called Dashboard Builder, which allows you to build dashboards on the fly. Literally, if I'm in the basement of a building and working on it, I can on my phone build these dashboards quickly and have information confirmed that it's moving to the cloud before I leave that building, or while I'm setting on the vehicle and doing some monitoring of that vehicle and moving data up, I can do all of that. So those are the basic steps that we go through. And again, DreamFactory gave us a consistent API with amazing support. I can't underscore that enough, how responsive the team has been in getting things right and doing it well. So we go get data, we run it into an engine, a solution engine. We run Solution Builder to configure that engine. Then we go and move data with Solution Builder out to those clouds, and DreamFactory is our preferred cloud as we go out and move data unless the customer already has an existing back end. And finally, Dashboard Builder, which will take that data and help us visualize it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive us through taking a look at this real quick so you can get an idea of what's going on. And lots of marketing slides, but let's go ahead and show the whole thing working. So I'm going to jump into Solution Builder, and at the same time, I'd like to affect, we're looking at the environment for DreamFactory on the right-hand side of the screen, and we're going to play back and forth between the two of them. I've connected here to a Galileo on my desktop, and it is connected to a piece of hardware called a PLC. And it's actually getting data directly in from that PLC, and it's bringing it in, and we can observe that data that's going on. I've got a quick simulator for temperature here, so the very first channel 1 that I'm working on, I can manipulate that piece of data by just directing the simulator on my desk. So that's great. I've got information coming in, and let's say that information is representing a temperature that I want to work in. I'm going to create a quick connection. I have created a virtual facility here and just added data to it until I got what I wanted. And let's say I'm going to measure the lobby temperature in my building. So I want to look at that, and I create a connection. And I create a connection from that data, which is channel 1. I'm going to scale and offset it to make a lobby temperature out of it, because 21,000 doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Now, this is a lobby probably in purgatory right now, because I think we're at about 150 degrees or wherever we are inside the lobby. So let's take a look at the lobby temperature. So the first thing that we did was, okay, we're at 75 degrees. So we're not doing so bad so far, but as soon as we go up here, we start getting a much hotter lobby temperature, whatever we're working with here. So we've got 75 degrees coming in on the lobby. It's nice to see that update. Now it's 150 degrees. That's not so nice. So we'll tame it back down. But we do have that, and what we allow the user to do is quickly just visualize that information. Let's graph it. This is all desktop application stuff, right? So this is the things that we were all doing, and we were all frustrated because we couldn't figure out how to get from here to the cloud. And that's when interfaces like DreamFactory take us to that next level of tools that we were all back stuck on the desktop for a while. The other thing we want to do quickly with that piece of data is I want to average it. I just don't want to see that live data flowing. I want to create some lobby statistics. So I want to see my maximum, my run and minimum, moving average. I just ask for some statistics to be loaded. I check off a la carte the ones that I want, and I just drag in the data that I'm interested in, like lobby temperature here, and then I save those, and then those come back out and appear as new data in my data model. So I've got brand new lobby statistics. So I can also now look at my lobby statistics with a moving average, for example, that's being calculated, and that's telling me what my current moving average is. So if I adjust that lobby temperature by changing the input into the system right now, I've taken that up to 150 degrees, and I'm going to take that new moving average and I'm going to add it onto my graph so I can take a look at it again. This is just visualization. This is still stuck in the desktop world of looking at a local connection to something. So again, that's interesting. We've done our first 2 steps, but the next thing we'd like to do is, importantly, and why we're here, we'd like to move that data to DreamFactory. So what we're able to do is to take multiple, we have interfaced connections to cloud and storage, and we've used the DreamFactory interface to be able to quickly connect to DreamFactory. So what I want to look at is I want to create new data out in DreamFactory. I'm going to call it webinar demo, and what I'd like to do is every 5 seconds I'd like new data to come out of the system, and now I just choose what data I'd like. I'd like to see the lobby temperature where I'm at. Let's see, let's take a quick look here. I'm going to get my weather service, and let's see if the weather service is fired up yet. I've got a weather service where all I do is I set the zip code and start it running, and now I've got the current temperature at my zip code. I'm in New Jersey, just outside of Manhattan. So I'm going to take that weather data, and I'm going to also add the current temperature for that. And I'd like those 2 pieces of data to go on out to DreamFactory. So all I did was I drug out a window. I stuck the data in I want, and I tell it how often to do it. Or I could check on change. And now I just save that. That collector's been saved, and I start it running. And now that collector is running, and every 5 seconds, that data is going out to DreamFactory. Our job was to hide the complexity of the user conceptually thinking about storing data. DreamFactory's job was to change to conceptually present us a front end to storage and allow that back end to change. And that's really what both of us are doing, that work of hiding complexity, at different levels. And we've teamed together to provide the speed and the flexibility by which we can do this. So now that data is flying out to the cloud. So now we can take a quick look at that data coming out to here. So I'm going to take a quick look and see that information going out. So I've got a database viewer inside of here, and I can refresh my databases. This looks at all of the databases associated with this little Galileo. We're running all of this on top of Galileo, and this allows me to see all of the collectors that I've created inside of here. So I'm going to turn on my collector names so that now I get to see all those things. So let's get that going. And there's our webinar demo collector, and let's get a quick look here. I miss my eyes. It's often not so easy to see that, but there's the data that's coming out of here and going out to DreamFactory, and we can see all of that data that's flying out and being stored and timestamped back out into DreamFactory. So that gives us a chance to see all of that stuff, and we see that webinar demo, we prefixed this with the MAC address of my machine that's coming out. So if I actually went out into DreamFactory's interface here and took a look, it's sorted alphabetically, and we're looking at collector 984, collector 004. We can see all of that data that's going out into DreamFactory. So that was the process of going out to do it. So the next thing that API has allowed us to do is we have data going out of here and going out to that system. What I'd like to do is to see that on a dashboard. So what we're doing here is this dashboard on the right-hand kind of side of the screen is updating and showing me the current status of all of my buildings that I'm working at. These are actual buildings in Manhattan. So what I'd like to do is to go to a location here where I can play a little bit. So here's a dashboard that is showing particular pieces of information. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that dashboard right on the web page. So I'm going to go to that location screen. And now what we did was we taught this dashboard how we store data into DreamFactory. And it goes and looks at all the tables in DreamFactory and enumerates all of the capabilities in it. So what I'd like to do at the very top of that is I'd like to display that lobby temperature that's coming out. So I'm going to call this new display lobby temperature, and I'm going to just create a actual display of that piece of data. I go out and look at all of the tables that are out there, and what I'm looking for here is to take a look at the webinar demo, and there it is, and I can sort it by any of the pieces of data. There's a timestamp coming out. Sort order, we're going to descend it, and I'm going to listen to that quickly. So all I'm doing is quickly selecting what I'd like to see. There's the current temperature or the lobby temperature that's coming out, and I'm going to put on a nice little icon going inside of there, and we'll give it a start color of something blue, and if it goes over a particular value, we're going to go to red. So and that value, once it goes over 100 degrees, we're going to go ahead and turn it red. We're going to set the top text here. We're going to go ahead and say this was the lobby temperature, and we'll go ahead and put that value out. So this gives us, that's it. I know that was a lot of me mumbling while I was talking, but what that allows me to do now is I've updated that dashboard. I put brand new data outside of there, and I can see that my lobby temperature out there right now. I forgot to stick something in there. Let me go back and do that quickly. So I'll go back and edit the dashboard. Again, I'm on the phone in the basement of a building, and I'm quickly adding these pieces of data out to the system, and I forgot to put in the top text, which is the lobby temperature, and I'm going to save that. And then we'll go back and view it again. The API allowed a small team. I see that 150 degrees. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back down my temperature here, and then all of that data is going out to the DreamFactory collector, and all of that, so we see our moving average coming down in Solution Builder, and then that lobby temperature on as that collector is going out and updating it, goes ahead and adjusts the lobby temperature outside to the DreamFactory system. So this is our connection and our ability to go out to DreamFactory. We were able to do this and build this entire tool on top of what we were already doing in a very short period of time, and was the only reason we could do it when we have APIs that are as simple to use and easy to use from a REST interface as we're doing there. The other thing is the lightweight nature of the REST services allow us to do this even on a Galileo processor. So all of those things combine to give us an incredible amount of power. So if I'll jump back to the presentation here, we again looked at 5 things that we did. We got some data from the system. We analyzed that data. We sent that data to the cloud. We're bringing that data back in, and we're building dashboards on the fly to be able to do all of those things. And all of that was powered by having DreamFactory as that capability, or that single interface that we could interface to and allow that customer the freedom. The first time that happens with that customer, you go to the IT department, they said, do anything you want, just don't ask me to do anything. And so we go ahead and put it out to a public cloud, and we store all that information. The next thing, oh, wait a minute, management said they really need that information, so I'm going to host it. And that's the progression that we've been experiencing, and DreamFactory can, the guys at DreamFactory can reference their experience with that as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to show you, the overview of what we're doing and give you an idea of the tools, but all of that was powered by a small team in being able to do that, and that was because we had the support and the interfaces that are available from the DreamFactory platform. So thank you very much, and I'll go back to answering any questions from everyone. I'll turn it back over to the moderator there.
Thank you, Nat. Tom, I'll go ahead and share a few more slides.
All right, sir, you have the ball.
Okay.
And Ben, just a quick housekeeping for everybody. If you have any questions about DreamFactory or questions for Nat about what they've done with DreamFactory or with their application, please enter those into the questions area of the GoToMeeting interface. We'll try to answer as many as we can here at the end when we have a little bit of time for Q&A.
Great. So Nat, thank you very much. I think the demo really kind of demonstrated the product that you guys have put out there. It's a pretty exciting time, I think, with Internet of Things. I mean, there's just we're definitely in the early stages, so it's great to see kind of real working applications in this space, and we're really excited because we're seeing a lot of interest in that, and really trying to showcase what our customers are doing. So we really appreciate you taking the time to show that to our customers today. So to learn more, a couple things just quickly to recap. We have a lot of content that can be helpful to kind of learn about this. We have a case study that's a broad overview of this. If you jumped into the webinar late, or if you want to read a little bit more about it, you can go to the blog post and check that out. And then we have a wiki that has a whole bunch of blog posts related to DreamFactory and other examples and case studies that you can check out, as well as screencasts up there, which are all referenced here. And this will be recorded, so you can come back and take a look at this later. Also check out the developer forum. We just released that pretty recently, so if you have questions there, just go ahead and ask away, and we watch that, and we'll try to respond pretty quickly. So let me say a couple more things. Also, I just want to point out we do, if you've signed up for DreamFactory, we have 30 days of free support, which is great. You can try out the product and for your use cases and your app development. Mention the community forum, so that's always available to use. And then we have some support plans if you're decide to use DreamFactory for projects. Definitely check out the support plans. I think that will be helpful in many scenarios for developers that are building things. And then lastly, let's leave some time for Q&A. I think we're at about we've got plenty of time, so if there are questions, go ahead and please ask away. And lastly, thank you everyone for coming today. This was we're excited to have everyone on the call. If you have follow-up questions, our email addresses are here, and I'll leave this slide up so you can go ahead and write that down if you want to get in touch. So Tom, are there any questions that came through?
Yeah, just a few here. One question was if there's going to be a recording of this. I'd like to share it with some coworkers, share Nat's presentation with some coworkers. And yes, we are recording this, and we should have a link out to everybody that registered first of next week. So just wanted to get that out there for everybody. We have some questions here, a couple DreamFactory-related questions, Ben. One says I recently installed Touch Develop on my Windows phone, which gives me a great flexibility in developing applications on the go. The issue is that for database that uses Windows Azure or JSON, can DreamFactory support connecting SQL or MySQL to input and output data as JSON for connectivity?
Yeah, I mean that's what it does. So if you're let's just run through a scenario. You're connecting to a MySQL database. So we support, let me just step back a little bit. We support a number of different SQL databases, and what that means is if you go into the DreamFactory admin console and you go into the services tab, you can select remote SQL database, and we support SQL Server, MySQL, and Postgres right now, and we will shortly support Oracle and DB2 as well. And so when you connect to that, when we say connect, we mean basically you put in your credentials to that database and you save it. That creates a secure proxy, and it creates a REST API for that database. And when we say REST API, we mean all of the URI paths to that database that are just pre-built and ready to go. You can extend them if you want, but typically you won't need to. And then when you make that call from your client application to that database, you get JSON back from the DreamFactory server. So DreamFactory is proxying in, connecting to that database, and then returning the data back in JSON. And what's cool about that is it's very powerful because you can do all sorts of things that you would typically do with a SQL query, right? So instead of writing a direct SQL query, you can append filter strings to your URL path in the REST API call and get the data back as JSON, which is really great. And then if you need to go beyond that, right? If you have, let's say that you have a database and you have stored procedures and things like that already exist, and you don't want to rewrite those, or you can't deal with those RESTfully, you can still make a REST API call, and then you can, with the latest release of 1.7, 1.7.6 I think we're on right now, you can then trigger those stored procedures to act and then get that data back as a JSON packet. So that's also really useful for scenarios where you don't want to write the logic over from scratch. So hopefully that answers your question.
Great, thanks, Ben. So here's another one that says, since DreamFactory creates a REST in front of the DB, if I would like to get data from the DB and do some calculations, does that mean I would have to create another service on my own and connect DreamFactory to it?
No, that wouldn't be what we would recommend. So that's a great question, though, and I'll try to answer it. The way that we would recommend implementing that type of thing, there are a couple ways, but if you don't want to persist the calculation, like if you want to do the calculation at runtime, right? So make a REST API call. You have some fields in that data table and you want to manipulate and calculate. You can write a very simple server-side script which intercepts that API request and operates on it, right? So it can fetch, say two data points, for example, A plus B, two different columns, add them together, and then return A plus B as a calculation back as a JSON packet back to the client. So that, and you can do that right now just with a server-side script. Like you just write the server-side script right in DreamFactory's in the scripts tab. So you need to, in order for that, just one caveat is that you need to install DreamFactory on a server. So if you're using the free hosted version, we've disabled scripts because that's kind of hosted and it's multi-tenant, and so we need to be careful of people doing things there. But if you use Bitnami or you install it, you can write as many scripts as you want, and then calculate whatever you want and get it back as JSON. The other thing you could do, I mentioned before, like typically, unless you had a stored procedure already set up, we would say just do it with a script, but you could also do it with a stored procedure. If you have stored procedures already built, you could do that, and then that will get returned back as JSON as well. And go ahead, if you have like specific questions on that, you can reach out on the forum, and we can try to help you with the details of how you would implement it in a little more detail.
Great, thanks, Ben. We have, is it possible to store user data inside DreamFactory to DynamoDB?
It is. So two things about that. So DynamoDB is supported as a NoSQL data store. Depending on your use case, a couple things to point out. So user management, DreamFactory has a built-in user management system. So it comes with a built-in, DreamFactory comes with a MySQL database that's native to it. So you install the DreamFactory package, there's a DB there already. And within that database is a complete user management system, which has a schema for roles and a schema for users, and that's all predefined and built. And that's important because the security and session management is all tunneled through that user management system. But what's cool is that, or useful, is that the user management system has a REST API. So if we see some customers doing things like they might already have a user management system. So they want to, kind of get a user ID and then authenticate it. And there's a full REST API for the user system in DreamFactory, so it's pretty flexible. You can do mirroring and things like that. And it's also worth pointing out that we will shortly, in the next enterprise release that's coming around the corner here pretty soon, we're going to have things like LDAP and specifically Active Directory support, which is pretty important for I'd say pretty important, vital for lots of enterprises that are deploying mobile apps and need to inherit their LDAP security.
Ben, as a follow-up to that, they were asking if user management is just for admin users or customer users, and obviously it's for both.
It's for both. Yeah, and end users, as well as admins, right? So an admin is really the person, if you go into DreamFactory, is configuring. It could be a developer, it could be a team. Those are all users, and then of course your end users. And a couple things about end users. We have this concept, obviously, of like open registration. So you can use a user API. You can, in the config section of DreamFactory, you can say, yes, I want open registration. And then what you do is anybody who's logging in or signing up first in your application, you create that UI, and then you use the REST API to sign them up, and then associate that user that's signing up from your app with a role in DreamFactory. So that's an important concept to understand.
Great, thanks, Ben. So another question here. Someone's asking where they could find an example of JSON connectivity with DreamFactory. They said they're primarily looking at table updates and views. Do we have a good blog we could point them to, or should we just have them maybe reach out to the forum?
Yeah, I would say, well, a couple things. In terms of blog, depending, so there, my first suggestion would be to check out the blog, and there are a couple different posts there that you should check out. One is if it's a connecting to SQL use case, that kind of walks you through how to connect. And then the best way to see the JSON in action is once you've connected to your database, you can go into the API tab, and then what you'll find is whatever you called your API. So say you have a MySQL database and you called it, MySQL, whatever you call it, right? That's your API name. You go into the docs, which is built with we use a tool called Swagger, and this is live documentation. So you can just do like a get on your /MySQL API, and returned will be all of your tables in JSON format, and there you've at least confirmed that you have connectivity. And then you can do, you can specify like a get on a table name and put a limit on it or something to only fetch a few records, and then confirm that you're getting the data back. And you'll get everything back from that table if you test it, and then you can do things like specify which fields you want, and you can play around just in the browser and put in different parameters, and then you'll see what comes back. That's kind of the best way to see how the JSON gets returned. And you should do that before you even start writing an application, right? Just get familiar with the paradigm of how the API calls are structured.
Right. Thanks, Ben. And just one more mention. We've had a couple other questions. I think maybe people missed my noting of it at the beginning. We are recording this session, so if you came in late and missed some of the presentation or would just like to review it again or share it with coworkers, we'll be sending out a link to everybody here who's on the session today and everyone who registered with a link to the recording. And that'll be a public URL that you can obviously share with anybody that you'd like. So we got, I think, one last question here, Ben. Does DreamFactory support device registration management for push notifications? Or is there any add-on plugin that makes this possible, or should I just implement it using server-side scripting?
Yeah, so the short answer to that is right now you should implement it using server-side scripting. That is a very high priority feature, though, on our roadmap. So what we're going to do is provide kind of integration hooks to different push notification systems, and that will be coming up here pretty soon. But in the meantime, go ahead and use server-side scripting, and if you need any help with how that all should be implemented, just reach out to us directly, support@dreamfactory.com, or hit us up on the forum, and we'll try to help you out there.
So we've got another question about the blogs for JSON information or whatever. Ben, can we just quickly give out where they can find those blogs on our website?
Absolutely. I'm going to actually go up here for a moment. So let's see. The best place, if you go to, there's an index of all the blogs. I mean, if you just go to the www.dreamfactory.com, at the top there's blog, and you can click that. That's the main index for the blogs. But there's also, if you go to this link right here, which is github.com/dreamfactorysoftware/dsp-core, there's a wiki there. And what we've done is categorize the blog posts into various different groupings to make it easier to kind of navigate. There's a lot of content, so some of it's very technical, some of it's more high level, and that really supplements the documentation. So what we're trying to do with the blog is not just document DreamFactory, but to actually show some hands-on examples of working working things that you can learn from. And then the second thing is we have a number of screencasts, and we're trying to build more and more of those. We're doing these little 2-minute screencasts. We've started those that show very kind of simple use cases. Some of them are even just from the command line. So that's also listed here as well.